I'm Terri Malik.
And I'm Jared Treadway, and we're inviting you to co-create with us.
From our home base in North Central Texas.
We're hosting conversations that nourish our mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual intelligence.
We are about being spiritually physical.
And physically spiritual.
We are about inspiration.
And aspiration.
We are about involution.
And evolution. We're about self-exploration
and self-excavation. We are about each of us coming to know ourselves in our fullness and wholeness,
so that together we serve the expansion of human consciousness
with the gifts of our specific genius.
Welcome to 33 North, 96 West.
Welcome back into the studio here with Jared and I at 33 North, 96 West. And today we are going to have conversations about awakening. What is it? What are some experiences that we've had? Some wisdom that maybe we've gleaned in our journey and so forth. And I think I just want to open it up saying what it is in a very brief description for me. And we'll go much deeper and broader as we discuss. But for me, when someone says, what is awakening? I can summarize it very briefly and say, awakening is to self. You are awakening to all of who and what you are, to yourself and to what is within you as you. And then we'll explore deeper with what that is, because as we've discussed in previous episodes, that self is not separate. So it's very inclusive of what saying awakening to self is.
So, well, I did wake up this morning.
Probably will again tomorrow.
Yeah. I am conscious. What do you mean? There's more? Like, I was born, I go to sleep every night, and I awaken in the morning. What more do you want from me, Terri? What are you suggesting?
Good question. I want to answer the question succinctly. I want everyone to know themselves, or at least explore that opportunity, because it is an opportunity. It is a privilege. It is a right. It is an absolute. To me, that is the award of being here as a human in this vessel. The award is knowing all of who and what that is as much as we can in the scope of polarity, duality, and then accepting it, embracing it, and loving all sides and aspects of self. And in the process of doing that, we naturally expand our consciousness. We naturally evolve and grow. And it is an evolution.
Absolutely. So I'll make a couple of suggestions, and I think you'll tend to agree with these concepts. And maybe this is a little bit rebellious for some of you to hear, but Terri and I have an innate rebellious streak at times. So if you aren't curious or don't have, if you don't feel inspired to questions within you about your true nature, then my suggestion would be to stop listening to this immediately and continue on your merry way. Now, I think it's unlikely that anyone who is not curious has tuned in to this.
Yeah.
So generally, I think we could suggest or expect that anyone who is joining us for this series has some level of curiosity. Is there more to me than I have been told? Or is there more to me than has been offered? Or is there more understanding? Is there more that I can attain? All those are kind of questions. I mean, the question presents itself within you, right? So in the gene key synthesis, the 51st gene key moves from the shadow of agitation to the gift of initiative to the city of awakening. So what I'm implying is that you may feel some sense of agitation within you, or that there are questions that haven't been answered, that there's more to know about who you are and what you are and about your true nature. And that feels like agitation or questions. And the first step maybe is to give yourself permission to honor that.
Yes.
And then next is initiative. And Terri, you've already begun to speak to that phase. But do you agree with everything that I just expressed about this?
I do. And I would like to add a question to those inquiry questions. Is who I think I am influenced by who others expect me to be?
Ooh.
Took a minute to get the words. Yes.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Because I cannot even recall the number of times I have said this to myself, and of course have witnessed it with clients, students, friends, family, colleagues, the world, is that, but I know who I am.
But wait a minute. You've just used two different verbs.
Yeah.
You said who I think I am. Sorry, my voice cracked up. Who I think I am. And then in the second phrase, you said, I know who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And we've spoken to this prior. Is there a difference between thinking and knowing?
Well, I was alluding to the concept that we create identities based off of many things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's unconscious for a majority of the time we're living in that identity. And as it starts moving into the forefront, which is where I'm talking about knowing thyself, and we'll get more into how that might look, the process, if you will, or the opportunities of process. But it's nature, it's nurture, it is survival, it is coping mechanisms. There are so many ways that we create an identity and so many reasons we create identities. And we truly think that that is who we are. And so we will identify with that particular set of criteria by which we have navigated life. I would like to say when Jared and I have conversations about knowing yourself, knowing thyself, knowing myself, any words you want to put in there, whether you're talking about yourself or referencing someone else, to me, just the overall phrase is all about going into what is not in your conscious awareness. So when you say you think you know who you are, you're basing it off what's in your conscious awareness. And the invitation for exploration, and what I do call awakening, and many others reference awakening and may have completely different ideas and definitions of what that might be. But for me, it is going even deeper back into the unconscious. And you obviously in your consciousness can't recall the unconscious, but you can bring what's unconscious to the subconscious and so forth and keep bringing it forth. That to me is what expanding consciousness is bringing more and more into your field. So there is a level of knowing. And what you're doing is, I'm just going to use the word training yourself, allowing yourself to listen to the messages, listen to the inner voice, listen to that intuition, that inner voice, that gut instinct, listening to those things. And the more you do that, the more comes forth into the consciousness that you're aware of. And if the knowing comes first, the thinking will follow. If we stop at the thinking, in other words, this is who I am, and I'm going to define it, and I'm going to create some labels, and I'm going to create some identities, and I'm going to put them in a box, and I'm going to tie it up with a nice, pretty bow and say, this is Terri Malik. And I'm going to give that to every single person I meet. I'm a little bit I'm very much limiting myself, and I'm a little bit, I don't know, I'll just say I'm a little bit in denial, maybe a lot in denial, that I can open that box and there is so much more. There's so much more to explore.
So I think we've spoken to, in episodes prior, idealizing and thinking ideals into our perception. And I'm not going to diss on or judge the thinking mind, because as we've discussed, that's an important and valuable tool and aspect of who we are. But I think I'm going to repeat conceptually what you have just expressed in the way that it feels right and meaningful to me, which is that your ideals or your thoughts about who and what you are aren't complete. Because if you're thinking it or idealizing it, you're only operating from the mental aspect of your awareness. And so part of what I'm now just expressing is awakening to other aspects of your awareness. Like, for example, so there's the thinking mind. You idealize and you have ideas about your personality. And that influences, as you said, how you present and how you interact, and it can be limiting. So what else is beyond that? Well, knowing is different from thinking. Like, knowing is cellular certainty. Instead of saying, I think I'm a man, this is just going to be an expression of this. Instead of saying, I think I'm a man, I can say, I know that my soul transcends and includes all ideas of gender. I just know that. So my personality, my small self, my incarnation, in this lifetime, I'm identified as being a man. I'm in a man's body. But the further I go into, as you said, expanding my consciousness and bringing things from beyond what I think consciously, that idea of defining myself through what I think becomes inadequate. I think I've just finally made the point I was trying to make. Do you resonate with what I'm saying?
I do. And I want to bring a point that ties us back to some previous episodes and say this is what I'm talking about when I say both and. Because to follow Jared's lead, I am a woman. And I am a multidimensional being. And I am a God spark. And I am an aspect of divine. I am also, to come back to the where I started, I am a woman. I am also short. I am I am petite, or I can bring all these things in, and I don't have any judgment or ill will or discomfort around any of that. In other words, me being a petite woman, again, I've said before, is no less divine than me being a multidimensional, non-gender being of light. So I love that you were bringing those examples in, because it again, it's both and to me. And when you embody the both and.
Yeah. So I'm going to be playful for just a moment. From your perspective, does it serve us better to have strong mental claims of identity, or does it serve us better to openly embrace not knowing the whole of who and what we are? Like if I say, Terri, I have no idea completely who and what I am. The more I learn, the less I know.
Socratic paradox.
Is it better to be open and sort of naive and foolish, or is it better to be rigid and fixed?
This is a really good question that takes my mind and awareness and consciousness in many directions, because I have come to know in my journey to be rigid is not serving me, it is limiting me. However, to know myself and to be sovereign in that, with no judgment and no shame and no guilt, is a powerful privilege as a divine human. And so often we get that mixed up. And for me to say, I have a particular gender, because you were talking about gender, some would judge that as me limiting myself. But that is a strong truth for me. It took me the majority of my adulthood to truly embrace my femininity, as it does almost every human on the plane of this earth, male or female. It takes us a lot sometimes to embrace all aspects of that, because I was in such a masculine, left brain dominance influence of task-oriented, this, that. And so I the only reason I say all that is to tie it back to, there is a difference between owning who and what you are, owning it, embracing it, loving it, with the guidance of being open to what I don't know and what I can know and what I can embrace and what I can continue to evolve into. But yes, holding too rigid to it. For example, I will use a phrase that is said often to me over the years is, I will literally have people walk in my office over the years, more so in probably about 10 years ago or closer to that. I identify as this, and anything you do or say that influences me otherwise is not acceptable. A lot of high criteria given to me, expectations and criteria. And I tell them, well, I'm really not too concerned about what you identify as long as you know that it's your truth. In other words, did you pick that label off of a shelf and say, I like this label, I'm going to choose to be this? Or is that really truly who you genuinely are? Yeah.
So I want to first express, I have no idea why I used gender as the example, unless it's just alive in the field right
It's
now.
alive in the field.
And it's
Yeah.
fine to use that as an example. Secondly, I would like to say I absolutely love and appreciate my masculinity and being in a man's body, and I love my body, and I'm not among any voice who would deny that.
Yeah.
And I'm also not judging or criticizing the denial of it. But what I am suggesting is that I have allowed my consciousness to expand to also include the feminine aspects of my nature. So while I celebrate my masculinity, I also celebrate my femininity. And I'm very caring and nurturing and at sometimes yielding and receptive. And that's a beautiful, real aspect of how I am presenting in this incarnation. Mm-hmm. When I spoke to, and I think, Terri, you would agree with me, when you arrived at a moment where you were really embracing your femininity and celebrating it, it wasn't at the denial of the masculine traits that you have.
It was not after a short period of that, because there was some denial. Because I identified it as something within me. Let me see if I can say this a different way. I did not deny at all my masculine aspects. I'm actually quite proud of them, and that's the honest truth. I mean, I through a program that is channeled through me and moved through me that I've created, they actually these different aspects of me have names, and I was very proud of the name that was given to me actually by an author. She's like, you have this energy, and she started naming me. And my point is, I was very passionate about that side of me. However, because of how I was taught through various concepts and beliefs and platforms through the spiritual community, there were many at that point that I had entered into that journey at a new level of exploration for self, I should say. I was actually told that was wrong. I'm actually going to speak to this as the woman in this conversation. I was told over and over and over that I was a victim of patriarchy. I was told over and over and over that I needed to rise up as the feminist that I should be, et cetera, enough said.
Yeah, I'm identifying some red flags in what you've expressed.
Mm-hmm. So that being in the field.
And we're all subject to those kinds of...
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean...
But was it my truth? No. So I wasn't denying my masculinity, but I was led to believe I should be ashamed of it. That I should recognize that I am a product of a victimized society as a woman. And I don't say this to make this at all about me being a woman and what women experience. I say this because every one of us, regardless of our culture, our gender, our race, our spiritual traditions, our anything, we can all identify with this. As Jared said, the red flags where we've been told reasons we should be ashamed of aspects of ourselves. And that, to me, really is what we're really talking about here today. How do you move beyond... And I have so much emotion moving through me right now because I'm feeling what is in the field and has been for quite some time. How do you move beyond that? How do you move beyond the identities you've created for survival, for coping, in order to belong, in order to be a part of society, in order to function in the workplace, in a career, in a relationship, in a family? That's a real question that we're really here to talk about, I think.
It's a huge question.
Yeah. How do we? And how did we? And how have we? And I say have we. I change it from how did we to how have we, because we have experiences where we've done this. I know Jared and I both have spent a tremendous amount of time and energy on this. Do we continue to do this? Yes.
Yes. Okay. So just going to the gene key spectrum of consciousness again to begin to respond to your question. And to our audience, to each of you, if you are still here this far into it, you're willing to acknowledge there's a question or a desire within you. You are willing to perhaps acknowledge your unease or agitation. And so I'm going to make a bold statement. Okay. Yes, I think I'm going here. So once the process has begun, the process of awakening, once the initial agitation or question has been acknowledged, and the process has begun in earnest, Terri, will it stop? Will it go away?
No.
No. And so, dun, dun, dun. Unfortunately, or actually fortunately, congratulations. You're on your way. So, now the question is how to navigate that.
Yeah.
Before we get into any real world 3D pragmatic ways of engaging in a process or finding modalities, and I think we should go to those places. But before we do that, let me ask another question. Is there any soul that was not birthed by source energy or the creator or God or spirit at the beginning?
No.
No. So, as you embark on this journey, we are empowering you to accept and embrace and just know that. Because keeping that in your awareness will offer you some succor and support and nourishment in any moment, regardless of what's being outpictured in your experience. Next question, and then we can get into some nitty-gritty stuff. Terri, is there any soul that is not on a trajectory back to its full awareness and wholeness inside the energy of Source?
No.
You can't get off your path.
Mm-mm.
And all paths lead home.
Yeah.
So, everywhere we go from there is just icing on the cake to this conversation.
You can make that conscious choice to really invest the time and energy for that excavation to come to remember who you are, all of who and what you are. Or you can kick and scream and fight it and deny it. And you'll create more of whichever those you choose.
Absolutely. And you've just inspired another question, which is this is to give us permission, all of us, to release some of that guilt and shame and those emotions that we're carrying around. Is there any soul or any human being that is exempt from the process of this growth, evolution. As you've said before, you like the idea of remembering yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anyone who's exempt from this, who doesn't have stuff or hasn't had stuff that they experience to remember themselves through?
There is not, and to think so is an illusion. Our own illusion, our own delusion, if we think we are exempt from that. Because that, again, is separateness consciousness.
Yeah. And I just want to kind of put this in real concrete 3D terms.
Yeah.
That person on your social media feed or the neighbor down the street whom you perceive as being whole, perfect, infallible, and complete, it's not true.
Jared's giving away our secrets. No, there are no secrets. Neither one of us try to hide any of it.
You're reminding me of a song lyric I heard recently, which I loved. Advertise my secret. I don't really need it.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's another moment along, for me, a moment along my spiritual awakening, ongoing spiritual awakening journey, which is when I arrived at that point where I didn't any longer feel it was necessary to keep things in, like, oh, I don't want people to know this thing, or it's not that I'm like broadcasting I'm using my air quotes, broadcasting my flaws, like vomiting them.
Board.
Yeah, like, oh, everyone, look at how broken I am. No, it's not that. What I'm saying is, I was offered the opportunity to realize my humanity, and then I've been offered the opportunity to understand everyone's realness, everyone's humanity, and to know that everyone is on this journey together. And I think the more grace we can have with one another, the better.
Absolutely. With self and everyone else.
Absolutely.
And also look at it another way to, now, how do I want to say this? Another thing to consider. If you really do that self-exploration and excavation, and you really can say from a knowing place, I know myself, absolutely no one or nothing can have anything over you.
Which is why you use the word sovereignty often.
Yes.
It's beautiful. So let me inspire you to continue with this, but back up and suggest. So the agitation has happened. The questions are there. You've honored them. You're aware of your trajectory. Okay, now what? Next is initiative. You're feeling the fire within you to take some initiative to awaken, to learn more about your true nature. And you've just suggested something that happens at the, further along down the process, which is knowing yourself means sovereignty. But how do we get to there from agitation? You have some modalities, some things that you've experienced, some programs that you've birthed. So share some of that, and then I'll do the same.
Okay, well, I got excited and almost interrupted because you just said what's going on in my head is I wanted to bring it back to the word agitation. So I'm going to come back to start with, why is that agitation there? That is what is trying to wake you up. Yeah.
So I'm actually going to answer this question in a really amazing way. But I know this is the truth of the answer to that question, which is the source of creation gifted this species with will. Mm-hmm. And as we came from the etheric into physicality, we claimed separation in and made it manifest in the structure that we are in. And that is the cause of our sense of separation. It is basically fear. But there are all these myths about fall from grace, about eating the apple, about in different cultures there are these myths about this disconnection. And because of the gift of our will, our species claimed this. And now we are remembering our path through it back to source, back to unity.
The agitation is an activation.
Yes.
What as you're speaking, that's what I'm hearing is, yes, it when we're seeing it from the perspective of agitation and the kind of, I'd say, in the beginning, if you will, of becoming aware of this awakening, we call them triggers.
Yes.
And we mean it.
Yes.
And we mean it when we say it. That person triggered me. That conversation triggered me. That experience triggered me. And we will use that word until we just kind of beat it up. So I say that so you know what we're talking about. And that agitation is not there for you to put the brakes on and say, and let me expand upon what I'm saying. I'm not telling you to be a doormat either. But it's there to, it's your higher self. It's your I am present. It's your soul getting your attention. It is your soul getting your attention. And we're not even going to, I am not even going to discuss. All of that is Terri Malik, all the who's that are in here, we are not going to even talk about healthy boundaries and unhealthy boundaries and all of that. What I'm getting at, though, is that the common teaching is, okay, someone has created agitation in me. It's outside of me. Someone has created agitation within me. So I have to put on the brakes and I have to get them out of my life because they're toxic. I'm using language that is very common out in the field. This is not my belief or interpretation. This is my experience as part of my journey, as we all can say. So I was triggered. So therefore that person needs to be out of my life. I have to leave that job. I have to leave that relationship, et cetera, because I'm agitated. So the invitation to, quote, awaken and start the exploration is to say, consider saying, why is that agitation there? Because that's where it all has to start. The self-inquiry questions of the why as opposed to the out-pictured display of discomfort and distaste and yeah.
Yes. So beautiful. So I'm going to suggest there may be experiences along your journey where that is the way you will respond to situations. Like, I can't take this right now. It's too much. I need to take a break from the situation or you. I agree, Terri, to be careful with your assignment of blame to something outside of you. Ultimately, as we've said before, it serves us all better as beings, divine beings in plurality, as individuals on a journey. It serves us better as much as we can to be responsible for our energy. So instead of saying, well, you activated me, and you shouldn't have said that thing, or you shouldn't have done that, it serves you better to claim something different in that situation, which is, as you said, Terri, to open up to the possibility of the idea that there's some nugget in it for your soul's evolution and growth and learning and remembering. Because I think Terry and I both agree there's no interaction that's by chance. There's nothing that you experience that isn't there for you and for the other people involved in that situation. Everything is for all of us individually and collectively to remember ourselves through. And if you assign blame and deny your responsibility to it, my sense, my intuition is that, and my experience is that that same energy will present itself again and again and again and again until you receive what's being offered.
That brings up a really good question. So when you are creating healthy boundaries for yourself, I actually just answered my question. When you're creating healthy boundaries, who are you creating them for? So now that I've answered my question by the slip of the tongue before I was ready, is that you're creating those for yourself, not for those outside of you. Now, it will be outpictured as well through relationships and experiences. So if you are creating something for your own growth and expansion that in that moment is really benefiting you to move to a more expanded knowing of yourself, that is the process. The process is asking the questions, seeing those patterns, those loops, and saying, okay, if this continues to be a pattern in my life, is there perhaps a boundary? Is there perhaps a way that I can show others how to treat me that will allow me to shine just a little bit more who I really am? So we mentioned sovereignty earlier, and that's why we went back to agitation to come through this, is the process. It is a process. It's not a one-time thing. It's what you're doing is you, in expanding consciousness, getting to know yourself. I'm using the phrases that we've used often. You are the remembering, another phrase that I use, a word that I use. You are changing, as Jared mentioned earlier, at a cellular level. You're actually changing at a cellular level. And just as the body goes through a process of healing from a wound, it's not instantaneous. There is a process. There is a healing process. And you have to give yourself permission and grace as that happens, because how do you come to a place of sovereignty with all of who and what you are and stand in your power? By going through these processes, if you will, processes of changing at a cellular level, which changes the neural pathways in your brain. It changes how the neurotransmitters fire, the actual synapses in the body. It changes how your nerves fire. It literally goes to a biological, and we could go way beyond. I mean, it goes to subatomic particles and so forth. But having said that, when we think that there is a quick fix, there's a pill I can take, there is a modality that I can do for 21 days, and everyone knows me, I am big on the 21 days of a practice to create what could be called in just general terms a habit. But that's to go beyond that. We're not creating a habit. We're changing our cellular memory. And that's just the beginning. And then we just keep doing that and we keep doing that. And that is, to me, it's such a disservice that we do to ourselves, is to think, I'm going to go from not knowing myself at all, but claiming that I do, to being completely holy and fully in my sovereignty. Well, if you're fully holy and completely in your sovereignty, you are leaving the physical vessel at this point in time. There are levels of it, of course. So I say all that to say, be really gentle with yourself and give yourself grace. This is not an overnight process, nor is this a formula where you can say, okay, if I do A through Z, I will have arrived and I am now awakened. It's awakening.
So you've inspired some things within me that I want to make sure we express at this juncture in response to what you've just shared. And we've spoken to this in prior episodes, but it has to be said now. Is there any human being alive, or any being alive, or any being that is not worthy of self-awareness?
The answer is no, and I'm hearing something really strongly. Would you be willing to ask the question again?
Is there any being alive that is unworthy of this self-awareness?
Unworthiness is a human-created concept.
And it's a lie.
And it is a lie.
The reason I'm sharing that is because I'm knowing that some of us may hear this and not understand or feel comfortable or give themselves permission in a moment of activation to create a container, to pivot, to perhaps establish a boundary in a situation, because there's this inherent structural unworthiness that's been ingrained in us for so long, and many of us haven't addressed the unworthiness. So, for our part, I know you as worthy. You are worthy. Give yourself permission to be worthy. So, in a moment of activation, knowing your worth and taking responsibility for your energy in the situation, and being graceful and easy with you and with the others, how about just saying something simple or expressing something simple like, I'm really confused about this. I don't understand what's going on, and I need to take some space.
Yeah.
Go home and take a nap.
I was actually getting called to give 2 different scenarios that supports that. So I'm really glad you said that. So yes, I can have someone in my field that creates a situation or a scenario, circumstance, all of the above, within my field that is not comfortable. It triggers an aspect of feeling unworthy, whether that's even consciously in my awareness or not. It can be completely unconscious. And my reactions might look like, some examples might be, I've actually had this phrase said to me before, so it's coming through. How dare you treat me like that? Who do you think you are? You can't be in my life anymore. You can't be in my world anymore. Because what's happening is there's a level of, there's different depths of you that feel unworthy. So it's a fight or flight. It's a survival aspect of, I can't have them in my field because they make me feel unworthy, and it's all their fault. So that's where I was going with that. Or you can approach it as Jared said. You could just say, okay, why might this be activating something within me? But I always extend the invitation to not sabotage and not say, oh, it's all my fault, because that's also another extreme you could go to. Oh, I'm not worthy. It's all my fault. I deserved that. I deserve to be screamed at and yelled at, and I deserve to be treated disrespectfully. You are to come to that place of grace and gentleness with others and yourself and just say, I love how Jared said it. Right now, this is just not working for me, for whatever, or however you want to say it or express it. I need some time. It doesn't even have to be verbalized. You just kind of create, but the natural go-to within humanity until being more self-aware is you attack the other or you attack yourself. And that's what we're talking about. The more you become aware of who and what you are, the more you can stand in that and honor that. And in that process of each now moment of getting to know yourself a little deeper and know that you aren't separate from God, from Source, know that you are an aspect of that incarnation. If you continue to give yourself grace and love through that, as well as to the other individual, it can be an extremely amicable process and experience, and you both will grow at a much quicker rate than if we are just playing the blame game. Blame others, blame myself, blame others, blame myself. And to tie it back to something that Matt Kahn talks about is the inferior and the superior ego. The superior ego is, well, I'm sure not at fault. I need to blame the other person completely. The inferior ego says it's all my fault. There's something broken in me and I need to fix it. When it's neither. It's neither.
Terri, do you believe it's possible for the collective consciousness of humanity to expand beyond defensiveness and justification and blame?
I'm shaking my head because my answer is yes, because that's the world I've created. In my experience.
Yes.
Have I always had that in my world, in my field? No. But I have consciously created that.
So part of your, or perhaps I'll say, a result or a condition you've arrived at as a result of your awakening process is that you have transcended the phenomenon of blame and justification, and it's a whole this is difficult to articulate in words, but there's a whole other way of experiencing everything.
I'd like to add something to that. Overall, yes, I have. But know that it can come in. Someone or something can always activate you. So it doesn't mean you've transcended it to the point of evolving out of physicality and physical form and humanness.
Let's just clarify.
Yeah.
You've made two references, Terri, to this idea of I'm going to use one word, completion, and then I'm going to use another word, transfiguration. Like dissolving back into the ether, and you've completed your incarnation process, and it's no longer, there's no more learning for your soul, and no more, it's like you're done. That's the process you're referring to. Because
there are many that believe that. Yeah.
Well, and that there's a subtle form of spiritual escapism in hoping for that to be your trajectory, and so be very careful with that. Like that's a really rare and high phenomenon to arrive at that level of light and amplitude.
What I was going to speak to that is connected to this is that something can still activate you, but it has to do with where have I come to and how I'm going to navigate that and how I'm going to handle that.
So awakening doesn't imply completion.
Yeah.
And if the soul suggests that there are still opportunities for remembering and expansion and experience and growth, then that's the way it will be. As a personality self, you are not always aware of or in control of the broader picture of your soul's trajectory. And of course, part of the reason for coming here to this construct to experience life is so that you aren't aware, that you experience it in some ways surprise. Ooh, that thing happened. And so arriving at a moment where you say, I'm spiritually aware, or if you even use that other word, like I've become enlightened, and then moving into the next part of your life with the assumption that you're not going to be confronted with other opportunities to learn and grow and experience and remember, that would be a false supposition for most. Is that a good way of expressing what you were trying to say?
It is a good way of saying it. And you used the phrase earlier, be careful. And I want to say that I wanted to speak to a couple of sides of that. In other words, it's not just about being mindful of yourself. And it's not to come at it from, again, like I've said before, self-sabotaging, to say, oh, I'm still not there. I did something wrong. I can't believe I missed that. We've all said these phrases in some way. But also be mindful of who is in your energy field. So when I answered the question earlier that led us to talk about transcendence or transfiguration or any of those terms that came up, it was not to say that I have evolved past these experiences or let's see how I want to speak to this, because it's very important to, they're not in my field the majority of the time. I mean, it just is not in my field. When I said I have created that, I wasn't just talking about myself and my own evolution and growth and expansion and awakening, but what I draw into my field. And I think it's important for us to talk about that, because if we're doing it for ourselves, we're going to be bringing into our field more of that.
Well, yes, this is brilliant. And you may be saying this, and I want to make sure I'm getting it, or maybe I'm expressing it in a slightly different way, but it would work for what you're sharing. Part of, and this goes back to our previous 3-part episode series about the universal principles. If you understand your responsibility to the experience you're having, not for, but to, it could be potentially true that, no, I'm not going to, how do I say this? People, not just people, the experience that you're going to have is going to be resonant with the frequency you're emitting. So if you are in low vibration, you can have an encounter with someone and you will meet them according to your low vibration. If you are in high vibration, you will be meeting their high vibration. And if you occasionally meet them in low vibration, but you are in high vibration, you won't be able to resonate. It's like two repelling frequencies, and it sort of bounces off of you. So when you say you've created, and I'm going to say it this way, you have cultivated an energetic environment in your auric field that tends to draw to you experiences, people, stuff of like vibration. It's your responsibility to it, not for it, that this occurs. So Terri and I were having so much fun with this conversation that we went for almost 2 hours. So for your benefit, we have taken the liberty of dividing this episode up into 2 parts for you so that you can listen episodically if you'd like. So this represents the conclusion of part 1, and then we will publish part 2, and we're publishing them both together. So if you'd like to continue listening, you can just click on through to the next episode. As always, thank you for being a part of this, and I'll see you on the other side.